What's going on, guys? Have you ever wanted to tint your headlight or taillights on your car and couldn't decide whether or not a spray headlight taillight tint is best for you or if a vinyl wrap style headlight or taillight tint is best for you? Well, in today's video, I'll be doing a comparison between the two by showing you how to apply both and then talking about the pros and cons of each product to see what might work best for your particular application. So before we get started, guys, let's talk about the products that we'll be using in this video. For the spray headlight and taillight tint, I'll be using VHT Nightshades. This is a very popular headlight and taillight tint spray that you can pick up practically anywhere at your local auto store or at a Walmart. You can also order it online. I'll have links in the descriptions for all the products used in this video so that you can get them yourselves after you decide what might be best for your application. For the film type headlight and taillight tint, I'll be using Vvivid's headlight and taillight tint. This is a vinyl headlight and taillight tint, which is a dry application type of tint. What that means is it applies like regular vinyl wrap that you will put on the body of your car, unlike other headlight and taillight tints, which tend to be a wet application. This one is a product that I've used often and before, and I really like it, and so we'll be using it for this comparison. Okay guys, so now that I've talked about the products we'll be using for this comparison video, I'll go ahead and show you how to apply each of these to your headlights or your taillights. At the end of the video, we'll talk about the pros and cons for each of these products so that you have good information that you can use to decide which one will be best for your application. Alright guys, so before we get started on using the VHT Nightshades on my taillight there, you can see that I've followed some of the directions so far as cleaning the taillight. Cleaned that off after removing the vinyl wrap that I had on there before. And as you can see, I've also masked off the areas that I don't want to have tinted. So let's take a look at some of the other directions here. And so I'm not sure if you can see that. Basically, the first step is to clean the area you're going to spray really well. The second step is to mask off surrounding areas that you don't want to get coated. And then use this product in a temperature range between 60 degrees Fahrenheit or 16 Celsius and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 Celsius, and when humidity is less than 60%. So I am in those conditions right now. I'm closer to 60 degrees Fahrenheit and it's winter, so humidity is definitely less than 60%. So before you even get started, you have a couple things to do as far as cleaning and masking off the areas. Then the next step is shake can vigorously for 1 full minute until the mixing ball moves freely, and then shake it for 10 seconds after each minute of use. When you spray, hold it parallel 8 to 10 inches from the surface to be painted and use in an even sweeping motion. As far as number of coats goes, it says step 4, apply 1 light coat or just enough to change lens color. Do not exceed more than 3 coats or light may not show through. It'll dry to the touch in 1 hour. And can be handled in 3 hours and completely cures in 24 hours. So basically, you spray light coats, up to 3 coats to get to the desired tint or shade that you want. Alright guys, so now I've mixed this can for 1 minute. The mixing ball is moving nice and freely, and so the directions again state to apply 1 light coat or just enough to change the lens color, not to exceed 3 coats or light may not shine through. So let's slip just a little bit more. Test spray here. Okay. So I'm going to apply my first coat here. Alright, so I did a couple of sweeps on that first coat to do it lightly. I was trying to make sure everything looked shiny and glossy there, and that the coat I applied looked even across the board there. Alright, I'm going to apply another coat now. I shook this up a little bit more just to make sure it's mixed up really well. And then this says, as far as between coats, it doesn't specify a wait time. It just says apply 1 light coat or just enough to change lens color, not to exceed 3 coats or light may not shine through. It'll dry to the touch in 1 hour. So I'll add a little bit more So effectively 2 coats really, and then I'll probably stop there because it'll be just about as dark as my vinyl wrap tint. All right, I tried to do it in a sweeping motion, like it's specified, 8 to 10 inches. I didn't want to do anything too heavy because I don't want it to be too dark and the light will not shine through. So let's take a close look at it, up close now. So let's take a look at this. I've taken off all my masking around the taillight. So it's only been drying for about 5 minutes now. Still looks wet and glossy and shiny. The masking did really well, as you can tell, and see that it didn't paint over any areas that I did not want colored. And so again, you'll just have to wait until this is dry to the touch, which the instructions say 1 hour. Alright guys, so it's been a little bit more than an hour. I've let this VHT dry. So according to the instructions on the can, it should be suitable for touching. So, yep, it's fully dry. It's not fully cured. It says it requires a good 24 hours for curing. So how does the finish look? Not too bad actually. It's pretty shiny and clear. Again, I didn't go too dark as you saw in the video. If you get really close up, you can kind of see what looks kind of like orange peel. Maybe I just didn't put a coat thick enough, or I might not have applied it quite right. It's pretty subtle. You have to get really close to notice it. From back here, you can't really notice it. But up close, as you get really close to it, you can. So it doesn't look too bad overall. Actually, it came out cosmetically. It looks pretty nice, actually. Alright, so before you get started on applying vinyl tint, what you'll want to do is make sure that the area you're going to be tinting is cleaned thoroughly, along with the surrounding area, because this area the vinyl is going to be touching and tacking onto, and you don't want to pick up any dirt or debris from other areas and bringing it up into the surface that you're going to be covering. Once you've cleaned off that area, you want to make sure you have a piece big enough to cover the entire area, plus a little amount extra, so that you have areas to hold without putting your fingers underneath where you're going to be laying down the tint on there. That way you don't risk any fingerprints underneath on the areas that you want covered by the vinyl. So make sure you have enough top and bottom, all the way around, and then all the way to the front side. Once you're comfortable that it needs to be about where it needs to be, go ahead and start peeling it. If you have a magnet, you can use that to hold it up here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to peel off a portion of this vinyl from the backing paper. Like this, kind of reposition it back where it needs to be, about there. And then this backing paper, just for now, I'm going to cut off this excess, and I'm going to leave the backing paper on this part right here for now. This area here, basically what I want to do is use this area as my anchor, and I'm going to lay this vinyl down so that it's set firmly and securely on this part of the taillight, so that way I can heat the rest of the area and stretch this around this curved area back here. So I'm just going to take a little bit of time here to set this up properly so that I can be able to take care of the rest of the vinyl more easily afterwards. Switch sides here so I can get to this area more better. This is a nice flat area here, so anchor that down nicely. This is a high point ridge right here, so I'm trying to lay that on that ridge and kind of work everything up and around from there. Just like that. Okay. So I've got that anchored down pretty well. I'm going to go a little bit further here. Okay. Start peeling off more of this backing paper. So I the rest of the backing paper actually. Hold on the areas that you're not on the edges, or you gave a little excess so that you don't get your fingerprints on. And what I'm going to do next is heat this whole area that's loose, all the way up here, all the way to the bottom. And basically what I'm doing is softening the vinyl so that it will stretch nicely and around the areas that I want it to stretch or to conform to. So just getting it nice and warm. My tail light is actually a little bit cool, so the vinyl will harden up once it hits the cool tail light. So I'm just stretching this around. That's pretty okay. Don't know if I'm quite happy with that go. Let me see if I can get this set up a little better. It's not too bad, but I'm not quite happy with it. So pull this back to about right there. Maybe we'll come back some more if I can. There. Bring this down, and I have a little recess right here. I want to make sure I get that fed into. Like that. Get my heat gun again. Excuse me. And then basically do the same thing again. One of the great things about vinyl is it's repositionable, it's forgiving. You can see that even though I stretch it, giving it a little bit of heat, bringing it back to its original form, original shape. And so I'm going to basically just bring this and shape this around the rest of the tail light, just like that. I'm more happy with this go. So, once the warm is, I'm going to set everything down that I've laid over this high point here, kind of as my focus. Work this, even though it's curved this way, it's actually a flat surface here, so I'm going to go ahead and lay that down all the way around. In this area here, at the top, I can then, because I have it stretched this way, if I give it heat, it should fall back into place and conform across the top. So give it a little heat to soften up. And then now it's just kind of falling onto the top rounded part of this tail light. This part right here, what I'll do is I'll lift it up in a second here, heat it to shrink it back since there is stretch, and that's why it looks like that. Pop this up a little bit. See if I can maybe get some of these wrinkles out. Pop this back up. So basically I just have this area. I'm going to heat it to relax it, bring it back to its original shape. Take any stretch that was in there out of it. That way there's no stress or stretch at the edge of the taillight. And then I'm not giving any tension, I'm just holding it up so that it's flat, glassed. And then applying the rest of this down. Okay. Again, my taillight is kind of cold, so I'm going to try to keep this warm so that it lays down nicely. Okay. Now that it's warm, I'm going to give it just a touch of tension just to kind of glass all that out. Just glass this area. Okay. Use my squeegee to finish laying that down. Practically at the edge there, practically at the top. And here I am bringing this up and over the flat part and then up onto this rubber trim. Same thing around it here. And then on the edges, I'm going to bring it back a little bit, heat it to relax it again to get any tension off the edges. That way there's no stress on the edges there. When I cut it, this part here where it's warm, I'm just going to lay it down. I'm not stretching anything, I'm just really warm, softer, laying it down where I want it, bringing it to the edges that I want, and conforming it. When I heated earlier, any stretch that was in there basically shrank itself back. You can see the vinyl, it's not really moving anymore. I'm just warming it up. And that means that there should be no tension there. So I'm just going to lay the rest of this down while it's still warm and soft. Boom. All right, got that top path, if you will. I'm use my squeegee to outline this area where I'm going to cut. There. I do have kind of a recessed area here, so I want to make sure that I get the vinyl down and tucked in to this area here, just kind of an indentation where this taillight transitions shape. Now this I'm going to lift up a little bit, like that, just so it doesn't pop up too far. Then I'm going to work this down. And basically, I'm going to finish working this out. Feeding it into this recess here. Shrinking out that stretch that I put into it earlier. Coming around. But first feeding it here. Just like that. That way there's no tension inside this little canyon, if you will. Then I can adjust basically this bottom quarter or portion of the taillight now. Lift that up a little bit just so I can work with it a little better. Give it a little bit more heat here. Pop this up if I can. Put this back down into that recess. I didn't have that high enough because the wrinkle's right there. So I'm just bringing it back up again. Try to redo that a little bit. There we go. I want to get those out of there. I'm heating the whole area, not just one little area there. And the rest of this, I can basically just glass it out. This out here. Okay. Put this down. Put that down. Okay. That. Make sure this is fed in nicely to my canyon or recessed area there. Make sure everything is set down, lays down nicely. I'm going to be cutting at this line right here. So what I'm going to do, since I have some of this stretched out, I'm going to lift it up, bring it back just a hair, hit it with heat so it can shrink back to its original shape. And then once it does, I can finish laying it down. That way I know when to lay down with no issues. And there'll be no stretches. No stretch at the ends, at the edges of the vinyl where I'm going to be cutting. That way there will be no pullback. So there's nothing moving here. Putting that down. Lifting this area up so any stress that was there is gone. Pop this up a little bit. Hit this with heat. Let that shrink in. Hit this with heat. Let that shrink. This I lay down cold, so there's no stretch there. This area here, since I'm going to be cutting on this line, I want to pop up just past that line a little bit. Let it relax. You see it kind of relaxing there, shrinking back into the shape. Once it's had a chance to do that, I'm just going to, while it's still a little bit warm and moldable, use my squeegee to conform it to where I need it to be in preparation for cutting. Use my squeegee to outline this. Get this rolled over the edge like I want to. Make sure this area is tacked down nice and well. All right, and so this is wrapped and ready for trimming out. Get my knife. There's a rubber trim edge here. I'm going to use the side of my knife under the edge trim there. That's my guide. Cut that away. Okay. And then I'm going to use the side of my blade against the inside side of this taillight housing as my guide to trim this side off here. Again, side of my blade against the back side of the taillight housing so I don't cut or scratch the taillight. Seal my edges down since I just trimmed it. Area here, I'm going to follow this line to cut that. So I'm going to start it by kind of just using this line as my guide. And I'm using very little to no pressure. I'm just using the sharpness of the knife. And then I'm going to bring this cut line up to here. And essentially I'm just trying to score the vinyl. So make sure your blade is as sharp as can be. Snap off a new blade if you need to. Coming around to the other side here, using my fingernail to trace out this line that I'm going to be guiding my knife through. And again, very light pressure, using this line as your guide. And I'm just scoring the vinyl. Not trying to cut per se. Switch positions. Follow this around. Again, I'm just using this seam line here as my guide and floating a knife, if you will, in this little seam. Make sure I find my trace line, which is right here. Again, just following that all the way around. Little to almost no pressure, just letting the blade do the work for me. I'm holding here in case I can cut all the way through, that way I don't pull up my vinyl. Alright. Lastly, just give it a little once over with some heat. The areas that you trimmed out up here where I have a little excess, where I left a little excess, I'm just going to lay that down. Lay that all the way down and around. Give it some heat so it conforms. If I do have scratches in my taillight and the vinyl, I just give it a little heat and that will go away. Look for any bubbles that may have formed or you might have missed during the application process itself. Area that trimmed, make sure that's laid down also. Trimmed and pulled up, so in case I did pull up any vinyl, make sure that's laid down. Then add a little heat to make sure it's locked in. Alright guys, and that's wrapped. Alright guys, so now that I've shown you how to apply both the VHT and the vinyl tint, let's talk about the pros and cons for each of these products. Alright, so for VHT, there were 3 pros that I found for me. The first one is the application time, meaning the time it took to spray both coats. The second pro for me is the initial finish when I was done spraying it. And the third pro for me is the price of the VHT product itself. Alright, so for the first pro for VHT, which is the application time, as you saw in the video, it was super fast. I did 2 coats. Each coat took only about 15 or so seconds to lay down each coat, so 30 seconds for the actual application time. The second pro that I found, or that I liked with VHT, was its initial finish. When I was done, it was nice and clean and glossy and looked really, really good. At least on the initial finished piece to it. So for me, that clean look was definitely a pro. The last pro that I could see for VHT is the price. This can was $16 to $18 depending on where you get it from, and it says that it can cover 12 to 14 square feet. So you can easily cover, if you wanted to, all of your taillights, all of your headlights, side markers, blinkers, fog lights, whatever, and probably at least one more car. So for $16 to $18, this is a very good price proposition as far as a headlight and taillight tint option for you. So now that I've talked about the pros of VHT, let's talk about some of the cons that I could see or have found with applying VHT to my headlights or taillights. So the first con for me are the fumes. The second is the drying time. The third is that it's a messy process, or can be a messy process. The fourth is that it's a permanent thing once it's done. The fifth is that there's no really cool or unique patterns other than different colors that you can use. And then the last con that I think is questionable durability of this particular product once you've had it on for a little while. For the first con, let's talk about the fumes. When I was applying this, it was a very, 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 very strong paint smell. After a little while, it gave me a sort of a headache in between coats there, and when I was working on the car, I had to open the garage for a few seconds to air everything out. This even warns you to do this in a very well ventilated area. So the first con there definitely is the fumes when you're applying this particular product. The second con for me with VHT is the drying time involved. So after I sprayed the VHT on my taillights, it requires a minimum of 1 hour for dry time to be able to touch it, and then 3 hours for handling, and 24 hours before it is fully cured. So within the 1 hour, you're kind of stuck sitting around waiting for your VHT to be able to dry to even touch it. And then with a 3 hour handling time, what that tells me is before you can get on the road, you'll want to wait at least 3 hours, but at least probably 24 hours so that it is at its full hardness. So if you think about it, if you spray VHT on your headlights, for example, that's taking the brunt of wind and road dirt and debris hitting it, sand, etc., etc. If your VHT isn't fully cured and at its full hardness, you risk getting all those debris and things embedded into your freshly coated VHT tint. The next con is that this can be a very messy process. As you saw, I had to do a pretty extensive masking, which can take up a lot of time to mask off exactly where you want the paint, because that's what this is, a paint, to go or not to go. Also, because it is a paint, there's the chances of overspray. If you don't mask properly, guess what? You're going to get VHT on areas that you don't want to have coated with VHT, and then you're going to have to clean off those areas, which requires different methods, because this is a permanent thing. It's not necessarily easily removable. The next con is that this is a permanent thing. Once you put it on, once it's dried, that's it. There's really no going back. If you get pulled over by local law enforcement and they say your headlights and taillights are too dark, you need to remove it. You can't. You're kind of stuck with it. Also, if you go too far as applying, you go one shade too dark and you don't like it, guess what? You're stuck with that as well. So the permanency of VHT, even if you do a nice job of it, is that it's a permanent thing, and you can't go back once you've done it. Another con is that while VHT may come in different colors and you can adjust how dark or light you make VHT, the coating you put on your headlights or taillights, there's really no cool patterns. Vinyl has different patterns that you can put into it, and I'll talk about that later in the vinyl section. But with this, you're kind of limited to how dark you go and the different colors that they offer. The last con for me with VHT is the actual durability of this. Now, when I applied this, it looked really clean, really nice upon initial application, but I don't know about the long-term durability of this product. I have seen in person other people that have sprayed VHT on their headlights and taillights, and after about 6 months, within a year, it pretty much looks really bad. It looks worn out, it looks dull and matted, it's scratched, it's chipped. And again, because it's a permanent thing, you can't really fix it. You can add more spray to it, maybe, but now you're gonna have imperfections sprayed onto it. You're just gonna make things darker. And so the durability with this, for me, is a con. Just seeing how it looks on other people's vehicles after 6 months to a year. All right, guys, so now that I've talked about the pros and cons of using VHT, let's talk about the pros and cons of using a vinyl for your headlight or taillight tint. So for the pros for vinyl as your headlight or taillight tint, I found many more pros for this versus VHT. The first is that it's a forgiving product to use and apply. The second is that it's not a permanent product. The third is that it's a pretty durable and self-healing product once it's on. The fourth is that it offers a little bit of protection or some level of protection to your headlights or your taillights. The fifth is that there's no fumes when applying this. And the last pro that I found with this product is that it offers multiple colors and patterns, not just with Vvivid brand, but with other brands out there as well. So let's talk about the first pro, which is that this is a forgiving product to apply. And what I mean by that is, as you're applying this particular product, it's repositionable. If you mess up, you can pick it up, reapply it, If you have a wrinkle in it, you can lift it up, heat that out, let it heal, cool down for a second, and then reapply it again. And then if worse comes to worse and you just totally mess up, you can just rip the whole thing off and start over. Unlike VHT, if you spray that on, it's pretty much on there unless you wipe it off really good, really quickly with some sort of solvent chemical probably, which again could damage your taillights. You know, with plastic ones, they could be sensitive to different solvents. But with vinyl, you don't have that issue at all. The next pro is that vinyl is not a permanent solution, unlike VHT. Vinyl you can pull off at any given time you want to. I've had vinyl on there for a year and pull it off with little to no issue. Let's say that you are driving around and you get pulled over by local law enforcement and they say your headlights or taillights are too dark, you need to remove that. You can pretty much remove it right on the spot there. With VHT, you can't do that and you're kind of stuck with it. The next pro is that vinyl is a very durable product. What I mean by that is you can get micro scratches in it and things like that, and just with a little bit of heat to it, it has a self-healing property where those micro scratches and swirls will go away and you can restore the original gloss and shine to your vinyl. Is that vinyl is like a protective skin for your headlights or your taillights or whatever you apply it to. Now, it's not going to stop any major things that are going to ding or crack or destroy your headlights or your taillights, but it will provide a little bit of protection against minor scratches, minor rubs, and abrasions. And if that happens and your vinyl is damaged, again, going back to the non-permanency, you can peel it right off and apply new vinyl without issue and it'll look brand new again. Another pro and a big one for me, when you're applying vinyl, there are no noxious fumes. It was really nice to be able to apply this without getting a headache. So for me, definitely applying vinyl without the fumes is definitely a pro. The last pro for me with vinyl is that it has multiple different patterns and colors that you can choose from, and not just with Vvivid, but with other brands out there as well. With Vvivid, for example, does have a light smoke and a dark smoke, but they also have light smoke with a hex pattern embedded into it, dark smoke with a hex pattern embedded into it, a clear version of this with a cool holographic hex pattern in it, a biopulse version, yellow, blue, different colors. I also know that other brands can offer images embedded into the vinyl as well. And so unlike VHT, where you're just limited to the colors and the shades of darkness, and again, once you go a certain darkness with VHT, you're kind of stuck with it. With vinyl, depending on which brand you use, you have multiple, not just multiple colors, multiple shades, and multiple patterns that you can use to customize your look however you want to do it. So now that I've talked about the pros to using vinyl, let's talk about some of the cons for vinyl. So basically, I have found that there are two cons when you're using vinyl as your choice for your headlight or taillight tinting. The first con being that it's a little bit more difficult to apply vinyl than it would be to just spray your headlights or your taillights. And the second con is that it's a little bit more expensive than an equivalent amount of VHT spray or other sprays to cover the same amount of area that you would do with vinyl. So for the first con, which is applying vinyl to your headlights or taillights being a little bit more difficult than VHT, think about it this way. You're taking a two-dimensional object, a flat sheet of vinyl in this case, and you're applying it over a three-dimensional area, sometimes with multiple compound curves in certain areas of the headlight or the taillight that you're applying it to. And so it does require a little bit of skill. It can require a little bit of practice. You know, once with VHT, once you've got everything masked off and you have a steady hand at least, you can spray nice and even coats and be done in 30 seconds or so. When you're applying vinyl, it does take a little bit longer to do. On average, it takes about 10 to 20 minutes per headlight or taillight to actually apply, but it's not that difficult. But however, when you're comparing it directly applying vinyl to just doing a spray, this is a little bit more difficult to do. The second con that I found with vinyl is that its cost. Vinyl can be for covering the same amount of area you would with a single can of VHT spray. You'll probably pay a little bit more. VHT for one single can costs $16 to $18, and you can easily do your entire car, all the headlights, taillights, side markers, and blinkers with one can, and likely another car as well. To do the same amount with vinyl, you're going to be paying a little bit more than that. You can buy a 18-inch tall sheet by about 4 feet wide sheet for say about $20, depending on what you're applying it to. That may only get you 2 taillights or 2 headlights, really. Headlights can sometimes be pretty long and eat up a little bit more vinyl than you would expect. And so you also want to have a little bit of extra in case you do mess up. So it can be a little bit more expensive, but really not that much more. Alright guys, so I've shown you in the video how to apply both VHT and vinyl to tint your headlights or your taillights. Also talked about the pros and cons for both products. And so hopefully that's provided you with some insight and information on which product might work best for you. I know for me, vinyl has just way more pros than VHT does, and so for me, vinyl's a clear winner. But that's just me. You might have a different opinion. You might like the spray option as your particular option for your headlights or taillights yourself. I hope this video has been helpful, informative and instructive, maybe a little bit of entertaining. If you did, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so that you get notices whenever I post new content to the channel. Thanks again for all your support, guys. Have a great day.